Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar that's hosted by myself, Nick Platt, and we're joined by Anna Kavanagh from Henwood Court as well, and also Gemma Carter-Morris, Head of Wellbeing at Next Steps Consulting. This is a seminar that we're putting together in conjunction and co-hosting with Next Steps. As I mentioned, my name's Nick Platt. I'm the MD of Henwood Court and also part of the Executive Committee for the Initiative of Financial Wellbeing. As a leader of a small business, undoubtedly the most emotional professional thing I've ever had to do was to close our office and I'll send our employees home over 7 weeks ago now. Seems like yesterday. We were about to enter the eye of the storm at the time, and none of us knew what was going to happen. Henwood Court are a growing, thriving, successful business, but I still had thoughts on how we're going to keep the lights on. And I'm sure many owners of many other SMEs and large company CEOs were having the same kind of thoughts and worries. Over the last 7 weeks, I've undoubtedly suffered from stress, anxiety, much frustration. I've shed a few tears, but mixed with that, I've found time to laugh, to play, and spend some real quality time with my wife and children. It's been a real emotional roller coaster, and I'm sure many of you have been on a similar journey. If it was not for my team at Henwood Court, their strength, their resilience, adaptability, and flexibility, we would not have a business. If I do not look after them, we will not have a business. So while we take great pride in delivering first-class client financial advice and care, my first priority as MD is our employees who make up the Henwood Court family. If we look after them, then they will look after our clients. Over the past few weeks, our team togetherness has become stronger and our family business has very much become a business family. Employee wellbeing, of course, is very topical and why we felt compelled to run this webinar this afternoon. Speaking first, we have our very own Anna Kavanagh, who will explain how we've coped with lockdown, sharing our employee engagement experiences and best practice. Then our super co-host and friend of our business, Gemma Carter-Morris, Head of Wellbeing at Next Steps Consulting, will consider the 6 areas where employees need support. There will be an opportunity at the end for some questions via the Zoom Q&A facility, which you should be able to see at the bottom of your screen. Please type in your questions and we will address these at the end. So let's crack on. So firstly, Anna Kavanagh, our practice management consultant at Henwood Court, who will talk about employee engagement. Anna.
Thank you, Nick, and good afternoon, everybody. As Nick said, at Henwood Court, we're now in the 7th week of remote working. The timeline you'll see will be very similar to one I'm guessing you've experienced, albeit with every business experiencing different pressures and different priorities. You may have had to furlough some or all of your workers. You may have had to find very different ways to continue working within your business to ensure your employees and clients' safety. Whatever your unique circumstances as a business owner or member of the organisation's leadership, you will have been making major decisions rapidly, reacting to government guidance that has been and still is changing daily. As we came out of that initial phase of crisis management as leaders, we must critically consider well-being. For business to succeed when we emerge from this pandemic, you need your employees, clients, and you to be well to drive that future. Through the following slides, I'll take you on the Henwood Court journey from the initial days of wipe down your surfaces with anti-bac wipes to working in lockdown and beyond, considering at each stage the wellbeing touch points. In the space of 10 days, the leadership team went from communicating hygiene and action for everybody to take who was showing symptoms of COVID-19 to the whole team working remotely, other than one team member that we have in the office 3 days a week to process post and paper documents. Of paramount importance during this period was the decision making of the senior leadership team, recognising that decisions were to be made based on evidence and government guidance and not speculation. Each decision was clearly communicated to the team. We recognised at this stage it was evolving and still is. We engage with the team and consider their feedback as to the practicalities as they see it from their unique perspective of having to fulfill their roles and the impact of a decision on them and their role. This feedback loop's critically important in allowing for evolution to be successful, and resulted in Henwood Court being able to implement a successful remote working model within just 4 days, from going from full staff to skeleton staff to full lockdown, and finding an effective solution to managing the need for limited office cover whilst minimising risk. Simultaneously, all clients were being spoke to directly and reassured that the team remained there for them and it was business as usual, as well as addressing any immediate or concerns or questions they may have. The next critical touch point for employee wellbeing was the development and communication of the working from home policy. While most team members were familiar with working from home for the odd day, the impact of a whole team working remotely and implications of this for the employees, clients and business does need to be considered to ensure the team continue to perform effectively and safely. If you have team members working from home and you haven't yet done so, then this needs to be near the top of your priority list. It doesn't seem like a priority, but it is really important to spell out to the team your expectations and in return what they can expect from you. Don't use your standard working from home policy. That may provide a good starting point, but the circumstances of whole teams home working are unique and will bring with them their own challenges, so make the policy specific to now. As essential include contractual health and safety, GDPR and cyber security. Provide checklists to evidence you've liaised with your team. ACAS have a home working checklist. Use your usual display screen equipment checklist. Assess with a nod to these unique circumstances. Be proportional and reasonable. Take professional advice as appropriate. For example, you may have employees having to homeschool a child with special needs or look after a toddler who may ask for a contract variation. All this is critically important and evidences good governance in abnormal times, but to my mind, the most critical part of the continued success of your business centres around the management of the clients in your team. As Nick said, if you look after your team, they will in turn look after your clients. Remember, your team comprises individuals, varied experience and competency. We had one team member who had joined within days just before lockdown. Introverts and extroverts, parents, couples, singles, spouses of those working on the front line in the NHS. We all have our own unique story and we'll all react differently to this strange new norm and will continue to do so. You need to be always mindful of this when dealing with your team. Remember, everybody will be working isolated in their own little silo. Do not underestimate the impact of this at all levels. And remember, your managers and supervisors are also new to this. My advice, having managed a team for over a decade that regularly had members working from home for differing amounts of their working week, is trust and follow your instincts. A good leader, you will intuitively know where the gaps could be and who may struggle. Although, as with any change, expect the unexpected. You may find the unlikeliest team member rises to the challenge, whilst the totally together super organised member in the office may experience a wobble. Be flexible, be nimble, and most of all, be sentient to your team. The policies should be specific, addressing goals, priorities, expectations, how staff will be supervised, measured. You may of necessity have to add in more formal lines of communication, supervision. Remember that with immediate effect, you've lost that inherent in-office collaboration and the synergies you get across the office or at the coffee machine, chats, sharing information, brainstorming a problem, or dealing with an irritation. You will need to establish formal lines of communication to replace this loss or find your business strangled and without innovation. Spell out how and when you expect your team to communicate with your clients. This should be clearly and frequently. After all this is over, clients will remember who was there for them. Be present. The policy should also consider and provide a guide for employee wellbeing. Now really is the time to lead a culture of wellness. However, communication of the policy is not the end of the story. Once you have managed the crisis and the new norm is established, you need to ensure that it is business as usual. To achieve that, you need a strong, effective team, so work closely with them. At Henwood Court, we have continued the weekly leadership meetings, but have proactively added a weekly team meeting, departmental meetings. We require that staff that work together have regular planning meetings. And for newer team members, have allocated them a buddy to turn to for advice and support. Staff management has been ongoing, with personal development meetings being scheduled as usual. We're constantly reviewing systems and structure, and where necessary, making changes to allow the service to continue to be delivered effectively and efficiently to the same high excellent standard. At all meetings, we are encouraging the team to be aware of their home working environment. As a consequence, some staff, now we're into extended lockdown, have chosen to visit the office and collect their office chair rather than struggling on with a fixed dining room chair. We also constantly reiterate and flag when staff are obviously regularly working beyond their contracted hours. We're encouraging staff to create new routines and rituals too, like the usual commute, bookend the working day. It's all too easy when you're working at home to just check my emails in the evening and find yourself 2 hours later still at your laptop. We're encouraging staff to recognise that they still need that break to recharge, and will continue to monitor this. A well employee will be a motivated and productive employee. On the other hand, we have been flexible where staff have responsibility for caring for young children or homeschooling, recognising the additional pressure this brings, allowing flexible working around the family. Where a concern over a member of the team's wellbeing is flagged, we make sure that support is available and that we check in with them to see how they are doing. Resources shared regularly to reinforce the importance of wellness and what as individuals they can do to manage their own physical and mental well-being. We also encourage social contact. The in-the-office chats when making a cuppa or grabbing lunch are lost with everyone working from home. The team has a WhatsApp group that is well used. Chocolate was sent at Easter, and we have a quiz night organised for this evening, all designed to ensure that team spirit continues. As everybody settles into working in this new norm, you as the leader now need to start working on your business to ensure the wellness of your business and that you have a thriving business for you, your team, clients and other stakeholders when we come out of this. Now is the time to spend on strategic planning, perhaps consider efficiencies. Have there been any learnings from this new way of working? What will your service look like? How can you differentiate yourself? Who should your marketing target now? Throughout this strategic process, engage with your team, your clients, particularly your advocates, and consider your prospects, those future potential clients. Commit to how you want to emerge from this as a business, communicate, and most importantly, lead. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. I'm back. I mentioned earlier that I've suffered from a little bit of stress over this last 7 weeks. So we're never higher than having lost my internet connection for 5 minutes there. But I'm glad we didn't lose the webinar. That was my main concern, of course. So I'd now like to introduce Gemma Carter-Morris, Head of Employee Wellbeing at Next Steps. And Gemma's going to talk us through some key areas that we need to be thinking about for employees at work. Over to you, Gemma. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. And thank you, Anna, for outlining some of the things that you've been doing in Henwood Court, many of which I'll touch on a little bit more later on. So why wellbeing? Why do we need to have a focus on this now? There are many documented statistics relating to why organisations need a focus on employee wellbeing, both from a bottom line and return on investment perspective, and also it being the right thing to do to support your employees. I've highlighted a few here, though I'm sure many of these will be even more emphasised in the situation we're currently in. The recent research by Deloitte in January this year showed that the impact of mental health in the workplace is estimated at £45 billion per year, and that takes into account absenteeism costs, presenteeism, and staff turnover costs. And it's estimated that 40% of absence in the UK today is a result of mental health. Over the past few years, wellbeing is increasingly high on the agenda for leaders and senior teams, with more and more organisations implementing strategies, programmes, and initiatives to support this. The benefits to an organisation are significant and wide-reaching and include higher levels of motivation, engagement, and employee retention, a reduction in absence levels, and a way of supporting recruitment and giving you a competitive advantage over other organisations. The current situation we find ourselves in has emphasised the need even further to have a culture of care within your organisation and to really look after your employees. Everyone is going through their own individual challenges, which can be personal, relating to a change in routine, a lack of social interaction, worry about loved ones and family members, having caring responsibilities for children or elderly parents, or more work-related issues around job insecurity, reduction in pay, or being furloughed. And all of these are having a huge impact on our individual physical, emotional, and mental health. Are you as an organisation being proactive with regards to everything you can be doing to support employee wellbeing? Have you been pushing out extra information and resources, signposting to support structures, introducing new programmes to develop your offer even further, opening up conversations and communications to listen to your employees and show that you care and you're there to help them? Or have you just done what you've always done? If wellbeing hasn't been high on your agenda before today, now's the time to focus on this, both for the continuation of lockdown and as you start to prepare your organisation to transition and phase back to work, whatever that might look like. Next slide, please, Anna. So workplace wellbeing isn't just about having a strategy that sits in a drawer. It should be core to an organisation's objectives. It should align to your mission, vision and values, and should be embedded in all areas of strategy and policy. To truly embed wellbeing in your business, it needs an organisational-wide approach to culture, leadership, relationships and management with a focus on individuals' needs. We believe there are 6 key ways which you need to focus your attention on to develop and embed really sustainable culture of wellbeing. And these are leadership and culture, communications, managers and teams, individuals, physical health and mental health. Next slide, please. If you take one thing away from this presentation, it's that as a leader, you need to take time to look after your own well-being. I love this quote by Peter Drucker. Your first and foremost job as a leader is to take charge of your own energy and then help orchestrate the energy of those around you. As Nick alluded to, leaders are facing issues they've never had to face before, having to make hugely difficult decisions, having to manage large numbers of teams remotely, and are unclear what the next day, let alone the next few months, may have in store. This is a huge pressure and one where you need to be at your best, and for that you need to take time for yourself. More than ever, as leaders, you need to be leading from the front and leading by example. The whole organisation will be looking to you for assurance, communications, support, and most of all, leadership. And you need to live and breathe the values and behaviours of your organisation. Don't be afraid to show some vulnerability and show your human side. Employees are more likely to connect with you if they can relate to how you're feeling. We're working with a number of leaders specifically on how they can look after their own well-being so they can be at the best for the challenges they're facing at work. And we've written some resources on this that we'll share with you after this webinar. Remember, we're not alone. No one has been through this before, so reach out to your networks, learn from others, ask questions and ask for help. We are so much stronger by working together and in collaboration. Don't forget to recognise and thank your teams regularly. The world of work has been turned upside down and employees are doing what they can to keep organisations going. Think where you can recognise and reward those that may be going above and beyond, but be thankful to everyone for what they're doing despite these very challenging circumstances. An alignment with your senior team and HR has never been more important to help work through challenges and also use one another as a support structure. Next slide, please. Communication at this point in time is absolutely critical, and I don't believe that you can currently over-communicate. Employees will be fearful of their jobs and what the future holds for their organisation, and if there are little to no communications, this will emphasise this fear and worry even more. Consider what communications can be done on an organisational-wide basis, what need to be done in teams, and what can be done on an individual and one-to-one basis. and think, how would I want to be communicated with during this current time? I've heard stories of people being made redundant and furloughed by mass email. Think about how messages are going to be received, and think of the most appropriate, sensitive, and empathetic way to deliver these messages. Look at all the ways in which you can communicate, and don't just rely on emails. With the multitude of platforms now available that we're all using, it's easy to have face-to-face conversations, and this can really help with keeping up social interactions and a team feel. Think about how you can use videos to record messages, or write blogs to personalise messages a little bit more. Don't overpromise. These times are so ambiguous and ever-changing. Don't make commitments that you may not be able to honour, as this will just lead to a lack of trust in the leadership and the organisation. Increase consultations wherever you can with your teams about decisions, and make sure you get regular feedback, including how individuals are finding remote working and how else the organisation can support them. If your teams feel they're being listened to and involved in decisions, they will likely be more engaged. Have you as an organisation sent out any surveys to ask how your employees are feeling, what other help and support they might need, and how engaged and motivated they're feeling? Also consider having a specific communications plan for those that are furloughed to keep them involved and up to date with what's happening. It's essential to keep these individuals as engaged as possible so that there can be a smooth transition back into work and they will not feel like an outsider when they return to the workplace. Next slide, please. As well as the challenges that leaders are facing, managers are also finding themselves managing teams remotely, dealing with personal and emotional issues they may never have had to deal with before, as well as trying to communicate key messages and keep productivity levels up. It's crucial to have support structures in place for your managers as well, particularly those that may be inexperienced or not confident dealing with some of the issues that are currently arising. Less than 25% of managers feel confident to speak about mental health. How can you support these managers to have those conversations, or what extra training and development can you put in place for managers to give them the tools to support their teams? Have regular check-ins with your teams, both on a personal and professional level. Ask how people are, listen to their concerns, and make time for everyone in your team. Ideally, you should check in with your team quickly every day, and then a longer check-in at least weekly. It's also really important to be clear on expectations, priorities, and outcomes that you're expecting from your employees. Ambiguity in this area, again, can lead to worry and anxiety from employees. And measure your teams on their outputs and not at the time they spend on the computer. And as Anna said, most of all, trust your teams that they're doing what they need to be doing. Bring some fun into the workplace wherever you can. If you used to have weekly team lunches or coffee and cake catch-ups, continue to do these remotely where you can. Think about how you can get the whole team involved in quizzes or bake-offs or book clubs. These will really help keeping the team working well together and keeping that team cohesion. Many organisations now have wellbeing champions. If you do, how are you using these individuals currently? And what role can they play in your organisation? How can they be used to support with getting messages out to the teams? Can they develop content, videos and blogs that are peer-led, and so the messages aren't always coming from the leadership or HR? Can you ask these individuals to speak to people about what their worries are currently and have a focus on some of these areas? Think about everyone having a buddy in your team, someone who can regularly check in with one another. People might be more willing to open up to a colleague than a manager or HR. Next slide, please. Many employees will be working remotely for the first time. They may not be clear on what's expected of them and will be facing increased worries and situations they've never experienced before. Empathy and compassion are the greatest skills you can have currently. People are dealing with all sorts of difficulties and challenges, and by being empathetic, you can really help to reduce some of the pressure that the individuals will be feeling, particularly relating to work. Look at where you can offer extra flexibility for those that might be homeschooling or have extra responsibilities? How can you facilitate different shift patterns? Split shifts to allow people to juggle everything they have going on. Have these conversations with each employee individually and understand how you can help them manage their work and home life. Think about introducing one-to-one wellbeing meetings, which are purely focused on the individual, how they're feeling, and how they're managing with the situation. These could be delivered by line managers, HR, wellbeing champions, or think about bringing someone in that's independent to do these. The information that you get from these meetings will be invaluable in developing further ways to support your employees. Now is also a great time to continue to develop and upskill your teams. Think about what training is going to add value, promote any online training courses that you have through your organisation, or free courses that are available through lots of different channels such as LinkedIn and the Open University. In particular, this is a really good way to keep furloughed employees engaged and continually developing. Next slide, please. It's clear that we're going to have to live with the impact of COVID-19 for a significant period of time, and this is going to have a huge knock-on effect on the mental health of society. The main psychological impact to date is elevated levels of stress and anxiety, though levels of loneliness, depression, self-harm and substance abuse are also expected to rise. Those already living with mental health problems are facing extra challenges. Even pre-COVID-19, 60% of individuals experienced a mental health issue at some point during the year. Only 11% of people with a mental health condition felt confident disclosing this at work. 42% of employees have disguised they took a sick day because of poor mental health, and 15% have been disciplined, demoted, or dismissed for disclosing a mental health condition. There is still a stigma attached to mental health, and people still don't feel comfortable talking about any personal challenges they may be experiencing, and that it's okay not to be okay. Now, so more than ever, people need to feel comfortable talking about how they're feeling and not fearful of any repercussions. Think about how you as leaders can talk about any personal experiences you may have had around mental health, or encourage employees to come forward and share their experiences about how they're managing their mental health currently. Make sure you communicate through all channels that are existing support that are available to employees, and encourage usage of these, such as Employee Assistance Programme. I'm currently working with an organisation as a bridge between their HR team and their Employee Assistance Programme to offer an independent but personalised wellbeing service to support employees that may not feel comfortable talking to those within their organisation. The independent and confidential nature of this support is really important to employees, and I'm also using the learning from these conversations to help the organisation develop and deliver other support programmes they need to put in place to further enhance their wellbeing offer. If you do not have an EAP or other support services, there are lots of free resources and support available. The charity Mind have some great information on their website, as well as a support line that can be called. The NHS have an Every Mind Matter campaigns, and Mental Health First Aid have a My Whole Self set of resources for organisations and individuals. More information on all these excellent free resources that are available, again, will be circulated after this webinar. It's certainly more difficult currently to notice changes in behaviours whilst working remotely, but there are still many signs, such as individuals becoming more introverted, not wanting to talk or join video calls, getting upset or being late to meetings. If you notice any of these or any other changes in behaviours, have a conversation with the individual. Next Steps have also put together some information on supporting mental health whilst working remotely that we've been sharing with our clients and talking through with managers so they can talk to their teams about small and simple things that individuals can do to support their mental health. Some examples of this are keeping to a routine, being planned throughout your day, having regular breaks, not blurring the boundaries between your work and home life, minimising time on social media and watching the news, and taking time for yourself for self-care. Again, this information will be shared after the webinar. Financial problems can also significantly impact mental health, and therefore offering financial wellbeing support is a key part of wellbeing strategies, and this is now more relevant than ever. We are set to go into a recession with 2 million lost jobs and 9 million expected to be furloughed. Our financial awareness in general is poor, with the average household debt now at £60,000 and very low savings, and many of us are not equipped to deal with the up and coming financial situation. Many employee assistance programs offer financial advice. It's important that this advice is impartial and not linked to any other products or services. Also think about how financial advice can be tailored to different individuals, such as different age groups and genders, where concerns and worries will be really different. Next slide, please. Our physical health can have such a large impact on our mental and emotional health, and it's so important that we're looking after ourselves currently. Again, if you have existing support services, such as occupational health, circulate information on how to support physical health. Think about how you can make these messages more interactive than just emails and information on a website. Again, bringing personalised blogs or your wellbeing champions to talk about what they're doing. Being physically active has so many positive benefits on your health. And whilst we're all at home all day, we need to be taking time to be active, either outside in a safe way or through workouts at home. Again, there are so many free online classes that can be accessed, as well as the daily Joe Wicks workout at 9 AM that lots of people are doing. Being active can also be a great way to engage with your teams, learn what others are doing, and share workouts and videos. Again, think about how you can encourage positive eating habits, good sleep hygiene, and staying hydrated, all of which can impact our health and how effective we are. It's also important to circulate information on setting up a home workstation or office. Many people, like myself, are working at a dining room table, and small things like sitting properly and having your computer at the right height can help with back problems. Remember to get up regularly and move around, have regular breaks, and don't be tempted to work on your sofa or in bed. Many smartwatches now also have a reminder to get up every 30 minutes just to walk around, which can be really useful. Finally, there are many national campaigns that can still be supported remotely, and these can be a great way to get employees engaged and involved. Coming up in May is National Walking Month, so perhaps you can set up some team walking challenges. These could be competitive in between teams, or an aim as an organisation to walk across Europe or the world perhaps. Next slide, please. So that's some of the practical advice from us on what can be done currently and how efforts and interventions need to be increased to currently support employees. However, you also need to be considering what your wellbeing offer looks like when employees return to work, and how this needs to be developed and adapted based on the needs of individuals. Culture of wellbeing has to come from the top of an organisation and be part of all strategies, policies, communications, and the development of managers. Having an employee-first approach will have such positive benefits for your organisation and on motivation and productivity levels. Spend some time reviewing your current offer and base decisions on data and insight that you've gained from your employees or that you have from HR. Wellbeing should be tailored to your organisation and not based purely on what others do with differing demographics or employees. Look at your employee assistance programme. Ask, is this fit for purpose? Do I get the data I need from this service? The average take-up of an employee assistance programme is 4 to 6%. So what other support is there that might be more personal and dedicated, such as bespoke counselling services where people can speak to the same individual and build a relationship, or an independent offering, someone who's embedded in an organisation but impartial and confidential. A focus on mental health is going to be critical and supporting policies and procedures to embrace the management of mental health, as well as having an open culture, trained and confident managers, and external independent support are all areas that can help in this area. Think about signing up to the Time to Change initiative, showing your commitment as an organisation for breaking down the barriers to mental health. Line managers are also pivotal in managing and embedding wellbeing in your organisation, and having compassionate and effective line managers that are trained, educated and supported can make a huge difference. Finally, make your wellbeing approach personalised and employee-centric. Involve employees, gain their thoughts and feedback, use their expertise and make everyone feel part of contributing to an organisation that values, embraces and encourages wellbeing. I mentioned briefly at the start about the impact on the bottom line. The return on investment for investing in wellbeing is estimated at £5 for every £1 spent. So as well as being the right thing to do to engage and motivate your teams, it also makes business sense. Here at Next Steps, we're passionate about working with organisations on ways in which they can develop a new or enhance an existing wellbeing offer further. And we're happy to speak to anyone to help with their thinking about what wellbeing could mean for their organisation. Thank you.
Thank you, Gemma. That was really useful, insightful. And just to reiterate what Gemma has said there will be resources that will be emailed over to all the attendees, participants of today's webinar, with access to all of these resources, and of course contact details for Gemma if you have any personal questions. We have had a few questions sent in advance of this webinar, but we've had one from James. Thank you, James. The question is one for you, Gemma, and James asks, I really like the idea of a wellbeing champion. Can you talk a bit more about this role, how you identify and develop someone into such a role?
Absolutely, yes. So first of all, there's probably lots of people within your organisation that do have an interest in wellbeing and would be really keen to support colleagues further. So you can, ask for volunteers or people that you think in your organisation you might be interested. You can make an approach to them. And then once you've got a group of individuals, there's lots of kind of training that can be available. We can do training for wellbeing champions, just give, some generic training on what wellbeing means, specifically some information around mental health, maybe some mental health awareness training. Would be really useful. And then once these individuals are kind of trained up and ready to go, then this can be communicated through your organisation. And it's just a really good additional resource for people to go and talk to, for people to, share their concerns with. These wellbeing champions can really drive initiatives that you want to do. If you're supporting national campaigns, they can be the people that are kind of at the forefront of driving this from a peer-to-peer basis, as opposed to everything having to come from HR or the leadership team.
Thank you, Gemma. So typically, who would be a wellbeing champion? Are they from different areas of the organisation?
It can be absolutely anyone. Yeah, anyone that might have a interest in wellbeing or supporting people, people that maybe have sort of had challenges with their mental health previously might, really want to help other people. They might have really good tools and techniques that they'd like to talk about. So, there's a multitude of reasons why people might be interested in these roles, and you can have kind of specific champions that might look after mental well-being. You can have others that perhaps really into physical activity and they can drive physical activity initiatives within your organisation. It depends on the people that you've got really and that are interested in being part of it.
Okay, thank you. We've had another question coming from John. Hello, John. I think this is perhaps one for you, Anna, and maybe for yourself, Gemma. But if I ask you first, Anna, have you found any benefits arising from working from home? I don't know if that means you personally, but perhaps for the Henwood Court team, have we found any benefits arising from working from home?
Thank you, John. Yes, it's interesting, isn't it? I think the one thing that's become glaringly apparent, and I think I'm hearing this from lots of other businesses as well, is that we don't always need to be in the office. And I suspect organisations that were perhaps considering expanding office space and things like that will explore how remote working can form part of their strategy going forward. It certainly worked really well with the Henwood Court team. It's worked really, really effectively. And I think you find both now and in my previous experience that people working at home work really hard and really effectively. Often you've got quiet space. I know these circumstances are perhaps a bit different if you've got young children. It's perhaps not quite as easy if you're trying to juggle your home working and homeschooling, but often employees will work and engage really well. So yes, I think there's lots of benefits to be had, and I think lots of organisations will, going forward, look at how they work and how they can continue to fit this into their organisational strategy.
Gemma, anything you'd add to that?
I think just the ability to work flexibly really within your working day. So based on your individual circumstances and maybe at what point during the day you're most effective and most productive, it does give you that flexibility. You're not constrained by kind of 9 till 5 office working hours. Yes. I think it's important though that those boundaries aren't blurred in between work and home life when you're doing everything at home. So you need to be quite disciplined to ensure that you do stick to those working hours and then do have your downtime as well.
Absolutely, and I found that with weekends, Saturday, Sunday, they all tend to blend into one, don't they? Unless you tell yourself it's actually Saturday today, so do something different.
Yeah, a bit like Groundhog Day every day, isn't it?
Yes. Right, we've had some questions in advance. I think this one's for you, Gemma. So how do we start to prepare ourselves as an organisation for returning to work, and how do we keep employees engaged and motivated?
Okay, thank you. I mean, I think there's lots of things that you need to be doing currently to look at that. So part of preparing employees to come back is what you're doing currently. And many of the things that we talked about today, if you start to implement some of those areas, that's going to keep employees engaged and motivated now and feel that they're supported, which will really help when the time comes to go back into the workplace. I think if you've been doing new things such as, increased communications, more meetings or more one-to-one conversations, think about where you can keep that momentum on extra support that you've been giving. And there'll also be expectations now from employees with additional things that you have been doing to continue with those post lockdown. I think we've touched on the flexibility piece, but I think we've all realised now that we can work from home effectively. And when lockdown ends, there might still be people that've got children that can't go back to school, might still have caring responsibilities. And so thinking about updating those flexible working policies for your organisation and how you can be just a little less structured to allow that flexibility for individuals. I think definitely continuing to update your wellbeing and engagement plans based on what your data and what your employees have been telling you. And I think finally, listen and involve your employees in what the plan could look like for returning to work. They're far likely to be engaged if they're part of that process.
Yes, absolutely. I think part of our, I suppose a lot of it is around the uncertainty of when will we return and how will that return happen. I know we were having conversations, myself and Anna, about do we return on a rotated basis back to a skeleton staff? So all these conversations that we're having, I mean, we're working in an office environment where we're fortunate enough to be able to work from home. There's many businesses that, of course, can't. So I guess it depends on the sector that you're working in, whether you're retail, restaurants, office space will impact upon how these organisations return to work. Okay, we have another question. Again, this was sent in advance. What can we be doing to support employees that have been furloughed? Again, I think that's for you, Gemma.
Yeah, absolutely. So touched on a couple of those in my presentation. So communications are absolutely critical. You need to identify what your keep in touch briefings and processes are to keep employees informed, because as we know, the situation is ever changing. And don't make those promises that you're not able to honour, and just be honest. I think with your teams, people do really appreciate that honesty. I think continue to remind those that are furloughed what wellbeing support is available to them, and think about maybe still having those one-to-one wellbeing conversations with them if the employee wants to continue to offer that care for wellbeing. I did touch on that furloughed employees can still continue to do training and development, so send through opportunities for them, which could be organisational or other courses. And I think furloughed employees can still volunteer as well for the period of time that they're furloughed. So maybe suggest some local volunteer opportunities, or if you have a chosen charity as an organisation, have they got any opportunities that might be available? And I just think keep them involved, really. So if there's anything that's social that's happening, you know, quizzes or whatnot, then make sure that they are invited. And, you know, they might not always want to take part, but you don't want these people to feel outside of the team and feel like outsiders. So, you know, anything that you can do to keep communicating with them, to keep them involved, I think will be really, really helpful.
Thank you, Gemma. We do have time for more time for some questions. So again, the Q&A tab just at the bottom of your screen there on Zoom is where you can ask your questions. Another one's coming from John, perhaps one for you here, Anna. Do you feel that after normal life resumes, there will be an increased take-up of working from home due to the perceived benefits?
I think quite probably, yes, John. I think as I alluded to before, and that organisations will see benefits. I think managers, supervisors, business owners, leaders who have been nervous about having teams work at home will now realise that actually it's worked and it's worked effectively. And I think for employees, perhaps with children or with a long commute, or I used to find that with team members who just needed some quiet time because they'd got a project they needed to get their teeth into, there's lots of benefits and opportunities to be had for an organisation by enabling staff to work from home. I think the proviso is that it needs to be carefully managed. You need to be very clear about expectations, and as Gemma said, outcomes. You do tend to find in more normal circumstances with home working that people will often go above and beyond. So again, it's managing that, as we've been talking about, you know, it's managing the limits to the working hours and not picking your laptop up at all hours, because that is disadvantageous as well. And also you don't want to set up expectations from clients potentially, or from other staff that, oh, if somebody's emailed me at 10 o'clock at night, I've got to respond. So it needs to be a well thought through policy and well communicated. But yes, I can certainly see that employees will see the benefits, businesses will see the benefits, and leaders will be much more reassured that it can work very well.
Okay, thank you, Anna. Another question, again, this one for you, Gemma, please. What else are Next Steps doing with organisations that we could learn from in my organisation? Okay.
So I mentioned briefly the work that we were doing with one organisation, which is offering this independent and confidential wellbeing service that employees can use and talk about their worries or concerns, or just to have someone to listen. I can then support them and signpost to other services that the organisation might have, or, you know, other services that I touched on. This service works really well because I'm aligned to the organisation, so I know what their mission and vision and values are, and I know what their strategy is for wellbeing. But the confidentiality of it does mean that people might be more willing to sort of open up to me than they would perhaps their line manager or HR. And then the conversations that I'm having, they're helping to shape what the future might look like for wellbeing for that organisation, which is really useful for them. We're also providing lots of content and supporting with communications to teams around wellbeing, as well as I touched on working with leaders and senior teams on how they can look after their own wellbeing at this point in time, which many are forgetting about. And then working with managers on how they can lead their teams and those kind of one-to-one wellbeing meetings and what they can look like, and a bit of a structure for those. And I know that other organisations that I've spoken to, they've added new EAP programmes or updated their existing EAP programmes. A couple of others have implemented counselling support, so sort of very specific support for those that are struggling with their mental health. And also increasing that financial wellbeing, I think, which is now going to be more important than ever, really. So looking into what support structures are available to support employees that might be struggling with their finances.
Absolutely. Thank you, Gemma. Another question we had in from Mark. I don't have any money to put into wellbeing. What can I be doing that could still make a difference? Perhaps both of you can answer that one. We'll start with yourself, Gemma, first, please.
Yeah, so I think firstly you probably need to look at, do you know how much poor wellbeing might be costing your organisation? So do you have any figures around absenteeism costs, or how high your staff turnover costs are, or what your recruitment costs are? These costs are all kind of an indication of maybe poor wellbeing or poor engagement, and so having a focus on this ultimately can save your organisation money. I do think that many of the things we talked about today, though, can be consumed within your current costs. So increasing communications, increasing listening to your employees, upskilling your managers, one-to-one wellbeing meetings, breaking down some of those stigmas around mental health and talking about it more openly. Those are all quite small changes that aren't going to cost a lot of money, but can make a real big difference.
Anna, anything you'd add?
I think, yes, I'd certainly reiterate communication. I think it's communicate at all levels, encourage people to communicate through Zoom, through phone, through email, identify those that may be struggling and touch base with them, or make sure that they're in regular contact with people they would usually work closely with. What we've done is we've continued with sort of staff CPD and management, so personal development plans. That's a really good opportunity to touch base on a one-to-one basis, and also encourage the social, simple things like the WhatsApp group. We have stuff posted on that socially quite regularly, and it's quite a nice way for people to engage and keep in touch. I'm sure the quiz night tonight will be a laugh, and that's taken some time and Zoom, so it's not that I'm expecting to do well, but but that's a really good way again of engaging and building team morale, and it's just keep in touch. I think if you there are lots of ways, even if you don't want to invest in wellbeing directly, as Gemma said, there are still lots of ways that you can support your team.
Absolutely. We had a question coming from Deb, and it's a question for Gemma. How should we support staff who are shielding whilst continuing to work from home? Whilst continuing to work from home.
So I think this is similar to how you support those employees that are potentially furloughed, and what you do for anyone that's working from home, really. Continuing those communications as much as possible, and checking in with them on an individual basis, and having those wellbeing meetings, and just communicating as regularly as you can, really, and showing that you care, signposting to other areas where they can speak about their worries and concerns that they might have. But I think just that checking in, asking people how they are, and really listening to how they're feeling can be really helpful.
Okay, thank you, Gemma. Right, we have one last question, unless any more come in on the Q&A here today. But the last question, again, it's for Gemma. How do I get the leadership team on board to support wellbeing further, and what are the tangible benefits?
Okay, so I think, as I touched on before, showing them some of the statistics and information that's out there on what the return on investment is, and how other organisations have benefited from investing in wellbeing. But I think just coming back to your organisation and the data that you've got, and doing some figures around what absence levels are costing and staff turnover levels are costing, and just thinking about, if you made just a very small percentage change, how much would that save you as an organisation? And I think it's around understanding what the hesitation is from the leadership team on investing in wellbeing. And then if you understand this, you might be able to find the best way that might resonate with them as a team, and how you can start to influence them. But I think, ultimately reducing absence levels, enhancing retention, engagement, motivation, these are all things that will come out of people that feel cared for and looked after and valued. And, I don't think you can always put a price on that. So
No, absolutely. Okay, thank you, Gemma. I think that's perfect timing now. We've got a few minutes. I don't think there's been any more questions come in. Let me just check before we do. Oh, yes, there is a question coming from Emma. Interested in the roll figure, sorry, Gemma gave in the every pound you get £5 back, sorry, the return on investment. Can she say more, please, and where this data is from? So effectively, if you invest £1, you get £5 back. Emma's asking where that data is coming from.
Yeah, so that data was from the research that Deloitte did in January of this year, and it's actually between £5 and £12, and that's specifically focusing on more mental health interventions. But I can certainly share that after the webinar, that research that was done, which is really, really insightful, really, into, you know, what organisations or challenges they're finding with mental health and how investing in mental health can have real positive impact on the business.
I guess it's related to reducing absenteeism and raising productivity levels. Is it predominantly, Gemma?
Yeah, and turnover costs. So what it costs for you as an organisation when people leave, and what recruitment costs are. Yeah,
of course. Okay. Well, I think that brings us to the end, Gemma. Anna, anything else you'd like to add before we close?
No, I don't think so.
No, I think that's it. Thank you.
That's fine. Super. Well, I'd like to say a big thank you for everyone joining us here today. We had over 75 attendees, which is absolutely superb. I'd like to thank, firstly, Anna for her time in preparing for today, and indeed helping with our own employee wellbeing over the last 7 weeks. And Gemma, again, fantastic resource for Henwood Court. It's great to have you on board with ourselves. And thank you again for your time and your presentation. There will be an email of this webinar sent over to all attendees on Monday, and that will contain all of the resources that Anna has mentioned and Gemma has mentioned. So this will come with a recording of the webinar over to you all on Monday. So thank you again, Gemma, thank you, Anna, and thank you for all the attendees for making this webinar possible. Thank you.